Congratulations. You did it. You finished the thing, so why does it feel like you just got fired from the only job you've ever known? You're standing in a cheap, sweltering synthetic gown. You're gripping a hollow fake diploma tube because the university doesn't trust you with the real paper yet, and your cheeks are twitching from 3 straight hours of mandatory, polite smiling. Everyone around you is weeping tears of absolute joy. Your parents are beaming like they won the lottery. Meanwhile, you're mentally checking your pulse because you feel absolutely nothing. Nothing except a vague, heavy, paralyzing dread settling in your stomach. This isn't ungratefulness. It isn't clinical depression either. What you're experiencing is a specific, brutal mechanical glitch in how your brain processes long-term rewards. And frankly, it's criminal that nobody warned you about it. The reason you feel empty isn't that you failed to appreciate the magnitude of the moment. It's because of what your neurochemistry quietly deleted the exact second your foot stepped off that wooden stage. Fast forward to your own graduation dinner. You immediately pivot the conversation away from your accomplishment to what's next, treating a 4-year degree like a mundane chore you crossed off a Tuesday to-do list instead of a massive life achievement worth actually sitting with. Later, you post the obligatory end-of-an-era photo dump on Instagram. But you aren't reminiscing. You spend the next hour obsessively refreshing the app, staring at the engagement numbers, desperately trying to manufacture the serotonin the actual ceremony stubbornly refused to give you. There is a distinct physical drop in your energy the moment the institutional structure vanishes. You wake up on the first Tuesday post-grad, and the sudden lack of an impending assignment feels highly unnatural, like a phantom limb is missing and you keep trying to use it. You actually find yourself aggressively nostalgic for the agonizing stress of finals week. Because at least that specific flavor of stress had a clear, undeniable direction. This new, sprawling freedom, it just feels like sustained vertigo. By Wednesday, you start casually browsing master's programs or obscure professional certifications. Not because your career actually requires them. You're doing it because you are completely desperate to have an authority figure tell you what the next level of the game is. This frantic behavior reveals an uncomfortable reality. You were never actually addicted to the achievement itself or the knowledge or the growth. You were addicted to the specific, highly regulated chemical cocktail provided exclusively by the chase. Psychologists call this phenomenon the arrival fallacy. Coined by Tal Ben-Shahar, it describes the pervasive delusion that achieving a massive long-term goal will permanently rearrange your baseline level of happiness. It won't, not even close. Your brain operates entirely on a reward prediction error system. Dopamine is released when you anticipate a reward, not when you actually secure it. That means the peak of your chemical high happened weeks ago, while you were still safely anticipating the finish line. Think of your brain like a deeply corrupt contractor who promised to build you a spectacular mansion. The very second the last brick is laid, he completely packs up his tools and vanishes into the night, without bothering to turn the lights on. The biology here is actually quite rude. Nature designed you to strive, to climb, to push, never to arrive. From an evolutionary standpoint, a deeply satisfied ancestor was just an ancestor who got eaten by a tiger while taking a self-congratulatory nap. That profound emptiness you feel right now? That's your neurochemistry doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is aggressively stripping the pleasure from your present moment to force you to get up and hunt for the next piece of meat. But biological evolution doesn't fully explain the crushing identity crisis you're wrestling with. There is a second, much darker psychological mechanism operating in the background, turning this standard chemical drop into a full-blown existential threat. You aren't sad because school is over. You are grieving the sudden, violent death of the only linear narrative you have ever belonged to. For 20 straight years, your life was a highly curated video game with clear levels, obvious progress bars, and strictly defined win conditions. Now, you've been unceremoniously dumped into an open-world sandbox with zero HUD and absolutely no objective markers to guide you. The clinical term for this absolute freefall is identity moratorium, but in practice, it feels exactly like drowning. You didn't just lose a printed daily schedule. You lost the sole external validation metric that reliably told you who you were. You feel like a total fraud right now because you spent years meticulously building the persona of the perfect student. And now that the student fundamentally doesn't exist anymore, you're left alone in a room with just the person, who is currently significantly less impressive. The brutal truth is that you deeply preferred the crushing anxiety of a loaded syllabus to the sheer terror of a blank page. Because at least the syllabus graded you. At least the syllabus proved you were winning. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments, but you know I'm not. This transition violently exposes the dangerous gaping void between your printed resume and your actual self-worth. And that exact gap is where post-grad depression actually sets up camp and lives. You might be sitting there thinking, I'm not desperately looking for structure. I'm just burnt out. I'm exhausted from 4 years of relentless grinding, and surely I just need a really long nap. That's a highly fair assessment, and physiological fatigue is incredibly real. But ask yourself a hard question. Why does this fatigue feel less like physical sleepiness and more like a terrifying, hollow lack of purpose? If this were simply academic burnout, crossing the finish line would feel like pure relief, like a massive weight lifted off your shoulders. Instead, it feels suspiciously like that weight was the only gravity keeping your feet tethered to the ground. I am talking to you specifically. The person who constantly complains about being entirely too busy, but secretly spirals into a silent panic the minute the calendar goes blank. Because you have no idea who you are when the room gets quiet. You are actively conflating being tired with being completely unmoored. You're using your genuine exhaustion as a highly convenient shield. It's much easier to say you're tired than to admit you're absolutely terrified of having to write your own script from scratch. We need to seriously look at what happens when you refuse to pick up the pen to write that script, and instead, immediately scramble to find yet another institutional ladder to climb just to feel a fleeting sense of safety again. It's 11:30 p.m. on a random Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after the ceremony. You're lying flat on your back in your childhood bedroom, aimlessly scrolling through LinkedIn on your phone with the screen brightness turned all the way down. You see a long-winded post from someone you barely tolerated in Biology 101. They're loudly announcing they are humbled to accept an entry-level position at a firm you instantly recognize. Your stomach physically drops through the mattress. You aren't even remotely sure you want that specific job or any job in that field. But the sheer sight of someone else securing a brand new level makes you feel like you are already hopelessly failing at a race you haven't even started running yet. You force close the app. You stare at the familiar popcorn ceiling, and you start calculating exactly how many days it has been since you last did something, anything, that could be graded, definitively measured, or openly praised by a recognized authority figure. The silence in the house tonight is incredibly heavy. It isn't peaceful. It's suffocating, because for the absolute first time in your conscious life, no one is coming to your door to tell you what the assignment is for tomorrow. Share this feeling with someone who's quietly drowning in that same silence. If you don't deliberately interrupt this exact psychological cycle right now, you will spend your entire 20s aggressively chasing corporate promotions with the exact same frantic, desperate energy you used to chase high grades. You'll fully expect the next shiny title to finally make you feel whole. You'll twist your career into a high-stakes, exhausting scavenger hunt. You'll sprint until your lungs burn to reach the next checkpoint, feel the inevitable dopamine crash immediately upon arrival, and then panic search for the next flaming hoop to jump through. This creates a miserable existence where you are permanently living in the future tense. You'll start treating your present moment as nothing more than a dreary waiting room for a highly idealized version of you that never actually arrives. The real tragedy here isn't that you are ambitious. It's that you are completely outsourcing your baseline self-esteem to cold corporate systems that are explicitly designed to extract cheap labor from you, not to hand you a sense of profound meaning. You run the massive risk of waking up at 30, having flawlessly achieved every single item on the list, only to realize you painstakingly built a resume instead of a life. And by then, the hollowness isn't just a temporary post-grad glitch, it's structural. The only way out of this trap is to stop desperately looking for a syllabus that simply doesn't exist anymore. You have to finally accept that the terrifying feeling of nothing is actually the blank canvas you've been asking for your entire life. Save this thought for the next time you feel like you're falling behind. That overwhelming emptiness you feel right now is not a warning sign that something is fundamentally broken within you. It is simply the distinct, rushing vertigo of absolute freedom, the jarring dizziness of realizing you are finally the highest authority figure in your own life. You haven't just graduated from a university, you have finally graduated from the heavily scripted tutorial mode of human existence, and the profound nothing you feel in your chest is just the sudden absence of the iron guardrails that used to keep you moving safely in a straight line. This isn't about finding a shiny new dream to chase to numb the pain. It is about quietly realizing that the manufactured safety of the prescribed path was always an illusion, and you are finally opening your eyes to see the world exactly as it actually is. The ultimate goal isn't to somehow banish the fear of the unknown, but to recognize with absolute clarity that the fear itself is the only reliable, pulsing indicator that you are actually in charge of your own life now. A printed degree ultimately proves you can follow complex instructions. The heavy emptiness proves you are finally ready to stop blindly following them and start deciding what is actually worth doing with your time. You didn't lose your core identity when you took off the cheap cap and gown. You just lost the very convenient costume that was hiding the undeniable fact that you haven't actually built one yet. If you're still sitting there actively panicking about the void, you can always just apply to law school, because absolutely nothing soothes an unmoored soul quite like 3 more agonizing years of crushing debt and highly structured external validation. Subscribe to the channel if you actually want to understand how your brain works against you. Or don't. Go refresh your email for the 5th time to see if a recruiter just validated your entire existence in the last 10 minutes.